My name is Harper Doyle, and I will never forget the morning my sister called to tell me our father had died. The only problem was that he was sitting 3 feet away from me, stealing bacon off my breakfast plate while sipping his coffee. I quietly put the call on speaker. Simone didn't cry. She simply said Dad had passed away during the night, that everything he owned now belonged to her and her husband, Derek, and that I would receive absolutely nothing. Derek laughed in the background and said I was finally out of the family. My father calmly set his coffee down, smiled, and listened. They had no idea the man they believed was dead was hearing every single word. What happened over the next 2 days ended in a funeral our whole town still talks about. 8 months earlier, Dad had slipped on his back porch steps and shattered his kneecap. I was working as a traveling physical therapist several states away, so Simone insisted she and Derek would look after him while he recovered. They convinced him to sign a limited power of attorney, so Derek could manage his bills during the recovery. It sounded reasonable. I trusted them completely. Slowly, though, things shifted. Every time I called, Simone answered instead of Dad. He was napping, resting, too worn out to talk. I mailed him a replacement phone after she said his old one had stopped working. It vanished. I mailed a second one. Same result. When I flew home for his birthday, Dad looked wrong somehow. Thinner, quieter. And he admitted he hadn't seen a single bank statement in months, because Derek handled all of it now. The second I suggested we review his finances together, Derek got defensive, accusing me of stirring up unnecessary drama. Dad asked me not to ruin his birthday. I reluctantly flew back to work. A few months after that, an old colleague called with unsettling news. She worked at an assisted living facility where an elderly resident kept asking every single staff member if they knew his daughter Harper. That resident was my father. I drove there straight from the airport. He was thinner, but his mind was completely sharp. He believed I had abandoned him, because Simone and Derek had convinced him I knew about the placement and had approved of it. They'd taken his phone, intercepted my letters, spent months quietly convincing each of us the other had simply stopped caring. The facility confirmed in writing that there had never been a dementia diagnosis, no finding of incapacity. He'd been legally competent this entire time. Within the hour, he signed his own discharge forms and walked out beside me. The next morning at his bank, the truth was worse than either of us feared. Nearly $204,000 had disappeared from his accounts. Large transfers routed into Derek's landscaping business. Other payments covering a down payment on a vacation property in Sarasota. We also found paperwork for a substantial new loan taken out against Dad's fully paid-off house. An elder law attorney froze the loan within 24 hours, revoked every existing power of attorney, and uncovered something far worse underneath it, a second, forged power of attorney granting Derek total financial authority. Medical records proved Dad had been sedated during a minor outpatient procedure on the exact date that document claimed he'd personally signed it in front of a notary. Our attorney explained the case would be far stronger if Simone and Derek publicly acted on those forged documents before we moved toward criminal charges. That's when Dad proposed something none of us saw coming. His closest friend since childhood, Wendell, a retired county coroner everyone in town respected without question, called Simone and simply told her Dad had passed peacefully in his sleep. No fake certificate, no official filing, just quiet. Believable news delivered by a man nobody would think to doubt. Simone never asked how it happened. She never asked to see him one last time. Her very first question was about the paperwork. Within hours, she and Derek were already changing the locks on his house. 2 days later, the entire town packed into the community hall for Dad's memorial. Old Army buddies, neighbors, decades of church friends filled every row of folding chairs. Derek strode confidently to the podium and announced that Dad had left the house. The savings, the truck, everything, to him and Simone. Then, with something close to pride in his voice, he read aloud the line stating I had been deliberately left with absolutely nothing. The room went completely silent, because everyone there had known for 30 years exactly how close Dad and I had always been. Just as Derek finished reading, the side door creaked open. My father walked calmly into his own memorial service, wearing his best gray suit. The entire hall froze. Simone looked like she'd seen precisely what she had seen. Derek stood frozen at the podium, the forged will still raised in his hand. Dad walked forward, adjusted the microphone, glanced once at the closed casket, and said quietly, "Dead men don't sign paperwork." Our attorney stepped forward immediately and laid every piece of evidence out in front of the entire room. Medical records proving exactly where Dad had been during the forged signature date. Bank statements tracing every stolen transfer. The fake power of attorney. the fraudulent loan, the forged will, all of it pointing directly at the same two people. Even one of Derek's own employees admitted quietly and reluctantly that he'd unknowingly witnessed paperwork he'd believed at the time was routine. Within minutes, 2 sheriff's deputies were standing in the hall. Derek was escorted out for questioning as the entire story he'd spent years carefully building in front of this town collapsed in real time, in front of every single person he had ever tried to impress. Simone finally admitted they'd sunk deep into debt over the vacation property and genuinely believed they could quietly replace the missing money before anyone ever noticed. Then, without missing a beat, she turned and blamed me for exposing them. That was the exact moment I understood she wasn't sorry for what she had done. She was only sorry she'd gotten caught. Outside, just before the deputies pulled away with Derek in the back seat, Dad looked at Simone with complete, unshaken calm and finally spoke the words he'd been holding since that phone call 2 mornings earlier. "You buried the wrong man, sweetheart." Most of Dad's money was eventually recovered in full. The loan against the house was canceled entirely. Derek lost his contractor's license and now faces multiple fraud charges. Simone accepted a plea deal, probation, restitution, and 200 hours of community service. Dad moved back into his own house, and the very first thing he did that afternoon was wind our late, Mother's old grandfather clock in the hallway. The moment it started ticking again, the whole house finally felt alive for the first time in almost a year. Today, every single Sunday, I drive over for breakfast, and Dad still steals bacon off my plate just to watch me laugh about it. We recovered most of the money, but that was never actually the real victory. The real victory was that he got his voice back before it was too late, because money can be stolen, and property can be taken from you. But as long as you still have your voice, nobody gets to write the final chapter of your story for you. If you were in my shoes, would you have gone along with the plan Dad came up with? Or handled it a different way entirely? Let me know down in the comments. And if this story meant something to you, please make sure to like and subscribe for more.